My name is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and in this video I'd like to speak to Christian parents who are either already homeschooling their children or are considering doing so or are just getting started because I really believe that Christian parents are missing the whole point of homeschooling, and much of what they're doing doesn't make any sense. And I'd like to talk through some principles with you about homeschooling that I think will make sense of homeschooling and will actually allow you to succeed in it. And so let's walk through some principles, and I'd like to bring you some comfort and give you some encouragement to allow you to do what you do confidently as a homeschooling family. Before I get into this, when I talk about these topics, a lot of times people think that I'm some sort of theorist sitting in an ivory tower somewhere telling other people what to do. And I'd like to address that because it's false and it leads people to discount what I have to say, which I can prove because it's not popular, and people selling homeschooling products want you to believe things that are not true because it's good for business, but it's bad for your family. I've been working full-time in education for over 20 years. I was a private school teacher who worked in elite preparatory schools, helping students get ready for college admission in schools that cost over $18,000 a year for tuition. I was the upper school classics teacher. I had to work with juniors and seniors who were preparing for college admission, work through college admission with them, write reference letters for them. I taught the SAT prep courses in those private schools. I was involved at every step of the process in their preparation for application to and transition into college studies. So I have teaching experience in private schools, private college preparatory schools. Secondly, I worked to start my own Catholic school, the first Catholic school ever started in my county. I was the founder of that school. I worked with state inspectors to get a facility developed, ready, and approved for boarding school, which started in 2013 and which we operated for a few years before focusing all of our attention on our publishing work in the academy. But I went through the entire process and understand everything involved with starting a private school because I've done it. And I did it by myself with my own resources, with very little involvement from others, having to figure out how to get things done based on what the laws and regulations allow. I have practical experience in school development. And thirdly, I'm a homeschooling father of 10 of my own children, ages 21 down to age 6. I've been homeschooling with my wife for over 20 years now, and my 3 eldest children are in college, and they never studied anything other than the program that we offer in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. So when I say that this works, this works, this works, this is not necessary, this is what you need to do, I'm talking from a number of different points of view with proven experience. And so this is not theory. These are not some ideas that I think might work. This is not a homeschool conference talk or a website article where I'm just sharing my opinions. These are things that I can prove and that I've done in my own life and can show you are true. So I want you to have a little bit of confidence, to give me the benefit of the doubt and listen to what I have to say. As I said, the things that I have to say are not popular because they directly affect the modern homeschool marketplace. A marketplace that has taken advantage of ignorance and anxiety and simply sells things to parents and tells things to parents that are not true. And I'd like to help you to break free from some of these false ideas about homeschooling so that you can actually do what you want to do in your heart, what you really set out to do in homeschooling. You can do it, understand what you're doing, and succeed. And most importantly, have peace of mind and a good conscience that what you're doing is good and is best for your family. So, the reason I decided to do this talk today is because I've been in a number of conversations recently with parents of students who use the Classical Liberal Arts Academy program, and you don't need to use the Classical Liberal Arts Academy for this talk to be helpful. It's intended for a general audience. But I've been in talks with parents who've been struggling and confused about homeschooling. I've been talking with different groups around the country that are working to start private schools, and I deal with students all the time who are anxious about college admission and these things, and I see these three different groups plagued by two problems. The first problem is that they don't know what they're doing, and they simply don't know what to do. And they're asking for help because they don't know what they're doing. That's simple enough, simple ignorance, but they're asking for help. They're trying to learn and figure out what they should do. But the second problem is after they've been told what to do and have had it explained to them, they're afraid to do it. And so we have ignorance on one side, which we can overcome, and then we have anxiety and fear on the other side. Now, I can't change those issues, but I can try to persuade you and give you some confidence to know that the things that I explain are true and that you can trust them and you can go forth confidently and practice them because they'll help you to succeed in the end. So let's go through what I've got written up here on the board because I prepared this as I was thinking about these discussions that I've been having with some other parents, students, and groups talking about homeschooling and private Catholic education. I'd like to talk about how to manage a homeschool. How to manage a homeschool. First of all, before I even get into this, the idea of a homeschool is simply that parents choose to take responsibility for the education of their own children. It's very, very simple. Parents take responsibility for the education of their own children. Laws in different states often don't allow one set of parents to teach other families' children because that's not homeschooling, that's private schooling. And if you want to do that or try to do that, you often have to get approved for private schooling. Homeschooling has to do with you, a parent, teaching your children. That's what homeschooling is about. And as parents, you have the right to do this. It's a right that parents are able to teach their own children, and that's why that the American legal system, the American educational regulations allow parents to do that. We read about these things in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and I've talked about this quite a bit. I'd like to recommend to you paragraph 2229 as a reference point. This is just a little copy of the Catechism. Paragraph 2229, and I'll read it as we get started here. As those first responsible for the education of their children, parents have the right to choose a school for them which corresponds to their own convictions. Let me read that again and pay attention to every word here. As those first responsible for the education of their children, parents have the right to choose a school for their children which corresponds to their own, that is the parents' convictions. Okay? And it says, this right is fundamental. So this is where this whole discussion of homeschooling begins. I, as a parent, you as a parent, have a right. You have a right to choose a school for your children that serves your convictions. That's your right. as a parent, and that's a right that's protected in our country. Now, the problem is you have to have convictions. It assumes that you have convictions, that there are things that you are persuaded of, that you believe to be true, and you have a right to choose a school for your children that teaches and serves and reinforces those convictions. Okay? And so when we talk about homeschooling or any kind of schooling, because homeschooling is just one kind of school, and we have a right to choose a school that serves our convictions. And if we look around at the schools that are available where we live, or even at a distance, we could talk about boarding schools and things like that. But if we don't see a school that either teaches our convictions or that we can afford that teaches our convictions, then we have the right to homeschool our children, to educate them at home. That's our right, to teach our children according to our convictions. And I think when most parents get into homeschooling, that's really what they're thinking about. I hope that parents are not getting into homeschooling because they're just lazy and don't want to have to deal with schools. I hope they don't get into homeschooling because they think it will be cheaper than schooling. I hope they don't get into homeschooling because they're hoping for some kind of social life with other parents who homeschool, because those are not the reasons to educate your children at home. The reason to educate your children at home is because you intend to teach them your convictions. That's the reason, and the only reason, to homeschool your children. So the first problem that we're going to see in homeschooling is that many parents are in homeschooling for the wrong reasons. They're in homeschooling maybe because they can't afford the private school tuition. Well, the solution to that is to find a way to make more money to afford the tuition, or talk to the school and ask if there might be some way to arrange a tuition discount or a special payment plan. Homeschooling is not the solution for too high tuition at the local school. It also isn't the solution for your lack of a social life. If you're a mother, a stay-at-home mother, let's say, and you're concerned about your social life, and you see homeschooling as a way for you to get connected with other mothers and have something to do, you're getting into homeschooling for the wrong reasons, and you're going to have all kinds of problems. The reason to get into homeschooling is to teach your convictions to your children, and what that assumes is that you have convictions in the first place. And teaching those convictions and serving those convictions is the goal of your homeschool. That's the only reason to get into homeschooling. So the very first principle, the very first objective in managing a homeschool is to establish clear goals. Establish clear goals. And I can guarantee you, I've been in this for 20 plus years. Most homeschool parents, if I look them in the eye and I ask them, what are your goals in homeschooling your children? I'll get very sloppy answers that really have never been thought through in any detail. I'll get things like, we want our children to go to heaven. That sounds really nice. But that's not a conviction. That's not a conviction. That's not an objective goal that can be pursued. You can't make your child go to heaven. So that can't be a goal of homeschooling. We want to raise saints. That sounds very nice, but that is not a goal of homeschooling. It's not in your power to make your children saints. They, after all, must will it. You can't make a child become a saint. So saying we want to raise saints sounds nice, but is not reasonable. It's not even consistent with Christian teaching. The goal of homeschooling is to teach your convictions to your children, to raise your children within and under the influence of your convictions. And to do that, first of all, we have to establish clear goals. And when I say clear goals, they should be objective, they should be measurable. They cannot be vague and cute little spiritual ideas that people copy and paste or share. They have to be real, objective, measurable goals for your children's education. And as I said, if I were to talk to homeschooling parents, I can guarantee that most of them would not get past step one. And this is one of the sources of their problems in homeschooling. They really have no goals. So that's objective number one. Establish clear goals for your homeschool. Not for this week, not for this year, for your homeschool in general. Establish clear goals. Your right to homeschooling assumes that you have clear goals, and if you don't, then there's a problem. You need to spend time working to establish clear goals. That's principle number one. Once you've established those goals, now you may need help even with step one. You may need help establishing goals. It may be good for you to ask someone, what should my goals be? What should the goals of my homeschool be? Because you need to deliberate on those goals and figure them out, write them down, and be confident that that's a good set of goals that you can keep focused on for the next 20 plus years as you work through the homeschooling of your children. So you need to work to establish these goals. You may need to take time to do that. You may need to talk about it. You may need to ask for advice on it. But that's objective number one, is to establish clear goals. Once you've established clear goals and you are confident that you've got the right goals, step two is to seek out help to accomplish those goals. To seek out help to accomplish those goals. Now, what most homeschooling parents do is they get the idea that they want to homeschool their children. And the first thing that they do is they start looking at homeschool products for sale. And they start talking to people about homeschool products. Hey ladies, what do you use for spelling? Does anyone have a first grade curriculum they recommend? What do you ladies do for writing? What do you do for physical education? This is a nightmare. First of all, have you established your goals? No one goes into education asking what books are available. The homeschool market and the homeschool publishers want you to do that. They want their salespeople at the conferences, their catalogs, their websites, their YouTube videos. They want to be the first source you turn to so that they can start selling you their products. But you're doing it all backwards. After you've established your goals, you need to seek out help to accomplish those goals. And that help may come in many different forms. It may be curriculum materials. It may be websites. It may be people. It may be paid services, on and on. It may be groups. It may be those things. But all of these will be considered after the goals have been established. Having your goals, you'll take your goals and then think, what do I need to accomplish these goals? The answer is not going to be found in a homeschool product catalog. The first thing you should do when you've established your goals is ask, has anyone pursued these goals before and realized these goals? And if so, what did they do? Now, if your goals are very low, if your goals are, I'd like my children to go to college, well, you could drop them off at the public school. That's not a goal for homeschooling. College is a business. You can go to the community college by simply signing up and transfer into a college. You don't need to get admitted to Harvard to go to college. So setting go to college as a goal makes no sense. Your goals for homeschool should be based on your religious and philosophical convictions. And then you should be asking yourself, where in history or what people have ever shared my convictions and educated children? And then you should go to those people and look at what they did to succeed in serving those same convictions that you're seeking to serve in your homeschool. For example, I want to raise my children to know Catholic theology and classical philosophy. Well, I know that saints have done that all through history. So I can go back into history and I can say, well, the Jesuits in the 16 and 1700s ran schools for Catholic children that taught them Catholic theology and classical philosophy. What did they do? What books did they use? What did they teach? How did they teach? How were the lessons set up? What methods did they use? I can do research and go find that information and seek out the help that I need to accomplish my goals. I want my children to master the classical liberal arts. I can go back into history and say, well, where in history did people successfully lead children to master the classical liberal arts? And I can find examples, and they've left writings and textbooks and all kinds of other resources, and I can go back, consult those things, and see what I need to do. And then, when I've got that information, I can now start thinking about things like, what books should I use? Where can I get those books? Is there anyone who can help me do this? On and on. Starting with my goals and working down, I can now start to seek goal-focused help in my homeschooling. That's step 2. Now, once you get started in the actual work of homeschooling, and there's never enough time because these little kids of ours start shooting up, and we've got to figure this out often on the fly as they're growing up. We don't have time to waste. Once you get started and you get into homeschooling, you should have made decisions about what to study, how to study it, and so on, based on those goals. So you should feel pretty good about what you're doing. You shouldn't be doing what other people are doing, or you shouldn't be doing what happens to be in the catalog, or what happened to be at the homeschool conference. You should be starting with goals, and you should be seeking help, whether it's by people, programs, services, resources, books, videos, whatever. You should be seeking help to accomplish your goals. You should feel pretty good about what you're doing. Even though it may be hard, you should feel pretty good. Like you've got the right goals in place, and what you're doing, you have a reason for it, and you're pretty excited about getting to work with it. When you get started working, you're going to obviously need to know whether or not you're doing a good job, whether it's effective, whether it's successful. Now, what parents start to do stupidly is they begin comparing themselves. They begin comparing what their kids are doing to what they hear other kids are doing, or maybe they see other kids doing. Most of this is based on rumor or based on Instagram posts or social media conversations. Remember, your homeschool is based on your goals. It doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. You're not going to evaluate your homeschool based on what other people are doing. If that's what you're worried about, if you're worried about having your kids be like all the other kids, put them in a public school. That's not what homeschooling is for. These are your children. You don't need to compare them to anyone. When you evaluate your progress in homeschooling, when you want to evaluate your progress, when you want to sit down on a Friday afternoon and ask, okay, it's been 6 weeks. How are we doing? How are we doing? Your evaluation starts right here with your goals. Am I on the path to achieve these goals? Are my children making progress towards the goals that I've set? Evaluate your progress based on your goals. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Let me tell you why. There are many people who use homeschooling as a way of boasting and showing off. They get all over social media, they get involved in the local homeschool group, they get involved when their kids are young, and they have all of this impressive initial progress, and they post pictures on the first day of school all over Instagram and Twitter, and you see these things and you feel like you don't match up to what these other people are doing. But what we rarely see are the final results from those people, because they can disappear whenever they want. They can start with, fireworks and bells and whistles all over the place and make a big scene, look impressive, and then just disappear and retreat into the shadows, and we don't know what happened to those people. So don't compare yourself to what others are doing. Think of Aesop's fable of the tortoise and the hare, which everyone knows. Most homeschool families that you see at the local homeschool club or on social media are like the hare. They're off, full speed ahead. Like I said, fireworks and bells and whistles all over the place. All this commotion, all this noise, all this attention. But they don't necessarily succeed. They don't necessarily win the race. Most of them start, imprudently, impatiently, unrealistically, unsustainably, and they eventually crash and burn. And you find out that they eventually just put their kids in the local public school and stopped homeschooling. So don't compare yourselves to other families. Much of the stuff online is just baloney. Ignore it. Evaluate your progress based on your goals. And this takes guts. You have to have real convictions here. This is why you chose to homeschool. You have to be tough when it comes to evaluating your homeschooling. You have to ask yourself, what are my goals for my children, and am I progressing in those goals? I don't care what other people are doing, don't care what the public school claims to be doing, don't care what other schools claim to be doing. I'm educating my children according to my convictions, and I'm going to evaluate my children's progress based on those convictions. And you need the discipline and strength of a philosopher to maintain focus on your goals, because if your goals are different from the modern school, you may have to accept the reality that in order for your children to succeed in something that's important to you, they may have to fail in something that's not important to you. Or you may have to take some time to do some remedial work to catch up in something that's neglected because it's not a primary goal of your homeschool. A good example in my own life. I'm concerned about things like Bible reading, catechism, philosophy studies, classical languages. These are the things that concern me as a homeschooling father. I have nieces in public school who my children interact with every week. My children will often hear my nieces talking about what they're doing in math class, and they'll see work that they're doing and things like that, and it looks impressive. And my kids will wonder, why aren't we doing things like that? First of all, most of that work is impressive in a school setting, but useless outside of a school setting. For example, it's not going to be on any SAT. It's not going to be required for college. It's not going to be required for business or employment. It's schoolwork. And if you're not in that schoolwork is irrelevant. Now, there may be a grade level standardized test that a homeschool student needs to take. And homeschool parents should take those tests. And homeschool parents should seek to do well on those tests. You don't need to focus your curriculum on those things. There are other ways to prepare your children for those end of the year standardized tests. But it may be that in order to study the scriptures and be well catechized and study classical languages, or whatever your own goals may be, your children may not be able to score in the 99th percentile on their third grade science standardized test. And that's just real life. And you have to have the humility to accept that when everyone else is bragging about, Amanda's perfect standardized test scores. You have to be willing to admit, oh, my children, even if you even talk about it at all, I don't know why it's anyone's business. But if you do talk about it, it's no big deal. No one cares about standardized tests. Once these kids are out of high school, you'll never talk about these things again. You don't even talk about these test scores in high school. They're not important. Evaluate progress based on your own goals and have the guts, have the humility to be able to accept imperfection in one area for the sake of seeking success in another area that's more important to you. Stick to your goals. Have some guts. So evaluate your progress based on your goals. Number 4, I just explained this, ignore what others are doing. Ignore what others are doing and what others are selling. One of the dangers we fall into is we see things for sale and think that there must be some need for them, and it's not true. You need to establish your goals and you need to stick to your goals and let your goals tell you what you need. Not the publisher's catalog, not the homeschool conference, not the website, not the newsletter. Your goals determine what help you need, not what someone happens to be selling. Okay? Ignore what others are doing and selling and focus on your goals. 5th, as you go through homeschooling, you're going to have all kinds of problems. There are going to be all kinds of difficulties and struggles, all kinds, constantly. You're going to have to face different issues, problems. And what you need to do is just solve them one problem at a time. You need to be ready for them. You need to know that they're going to come. You need to know that they're completely normal. And working to solve those problems is the whole point of homeschooling. It's not a sign that something's wrong. We don't evaluate our progress based on problems that arise, because we evaluate our progress based on our goals. But when problems arise or when challenges arise, just deal with them one by one. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't make stupid, rash changes and decisions because there's a problem. Solve one problem at a time. For example, my first daughter, Elizabeth, was reading when she was 3 years old. My second son, David, was reading and writing at 6 years old with no instruction in reading or writing. He learned to read and write by copying Latin translation exercises. My second daughter, Mary, couldn't read well until she was 10 years old. It was a problem that arose in our homeschool with this one child, and we addressed that one problem, and today everything's fine. Okay? Problems will arise. It's no problem. You may have 1,000 different things. You may have one kid who's just as slow as molasses. It's no problem. Solve one problem at a time. You may have your oldest child get to the point where they're ready for applying to colleges and things like that, and your head is spinning. Where do we even begin? What do we have to do? Solve that one problem when it comes, one problem at a time. Keep all the other kids going, following the normal plan to serve your goals, and solve that one problem when it comes. Solve one problem at a time. There's plenty of time in homeschooling. There's plenty of time. Focus on your oldest child first. Make sure everything he or she needs is provided. and help him or her as he works up and through, solve one problem at a time. As he's going through, you're going to learn a lot, accomplish a lot. The second child's going to be easier. One advantage the second child has is seeing what the first child did. That's going to be true of the third and fourth child. It's going to get easier, but it's going to be different. There are going to be different problems, and you're going to need to solve one problem at a time. You don't need to change curriculum. You don't need to think about sending the kids to school because there's a problem. You started homeschooling because of goals, which were based on convictions. Those convictions likely do not change. And therefore, when problems arise, they're problems within this bigger picture of you educating your children according to your convictions. And you need to spot treat these problems when they arise and deal with them. It may require time. For example, this second daughter of mine, who was slow to read, is now 17 years old, and she's a little bit behind, but nobody cares. It doesn't matter. She's planning to take 2 more years to continue working on her homeschool studies. She's really starting to kick into gear now and do great work. If you're in the academy and you look on the leaderboards, you'll see her name climbing up the leaderboards. Even though she was slow before, we don't have to be finished when she turns 18. She understands that. We don't put any pressure on her about that because our goals have nothing to do with being 18 years old. Our goals have nothing to do with going to college when you turn 18 or leaving home when you turn 18. That's not our goals. It has nothing to do with that. We work on solving one problem at a time, and over the long time that we have with our children, we're able to do that. And you have to be patient, stay calm, and solve one problem at a time. And lastly, most importantly, you have to persevere to the end. When you set out on this work of homeschooling, you know that the goals that you set are noble goals, and the work that you undertake is noble work. It requires virtue and sacrifice, and not just virtue and sacrifice. Anyone can be virtuous and sacrifice for an hour or a week or a month or even 1 year. Homeschooling requires you to sacrifice and work for 18, 20, 25 years. It's the core work of your adult life as a Christian parent if you choose to homeschool. It's going to be very hard, it's going to be very expensive, and it's going to take a long time. And in order to be successful, you can't let these problems overwhelm you and discourage you and cause you to quit, because the moment you quit is the moment that you abandon these goals. And I see parents do this all the time. They come in saying all the right things, they know all the goals, they have all the right convictions, but when these problems arise and they face obstacles, or it gets expensive, or it's difficult, or they're tired, or whatever, they just quit. And if you quit, there's no excuse. What can anyone say? You didn't stay committed to your goals. And in any area of life, in order to achieve great things, you've got to stay committed to goals.